Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Understanding the Bible live broadcast. This Father's Day. Well, first, we're going to give a shout out to Miss Sonara Smart Dad, who, in about 118 years ago, campaigned for making Father's Day a celebration, a national celebration, and worked so tirelessly. And it's a long road until eventually it was declared a national holiday by Richard Nixon. But anyway, so to her, today we're going to be looking at the subject of I am my father. And I have chosen to read biblical texts, and we will do something with them. By the way, before we do all of that, the father in me says to wear my cap. This is Father's Day. The preacher in me says to pray without it. So, God between, so I might as well have to just, God doesn't really mind, but for the sake of us humans, I need to, if you permit me. We've chosen to look at two texts of the Bible, and by the way, we're going to read the text, but we're going to do something we already said not to do with the Bible. All right, I'm going to read these scriptures, but we're going to use them out of context. All right, I'm not going to do a contextual study of the Bible, and there's a reason for that, because also in the process we'll see how we can use texts creatively, even out of context. I want to read for us Psalm number 139 from verse 13 through 18. My New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, updated edition anyway. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know them full well. I know that full well, sorry. My frame was hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. Sorry about that. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. All right, and then our second text is from John chapter 12. I'm going to read verses 20 to 26. All right. Now, among those who went up to worship at the festival were some Greeks. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, and said to him, Sir, we wish to see Jesus. Philip went and told Andrew. Then Andrew and Philip went and told Jesus. Jesus answered them, The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Those who love their life lose it, and those who hate their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, there will my servant be also. Whoever serves me, the Father will honor. Again, I want to welcome you to today, especially our fathers. Come together and let's meditate together on this particular day. All right? I want us to explore on this particular Father's Day some foundational truths about fatherhood. And I want to promise you, of course, that you probably hear some things you probably never heard before or contemplated, okay? So I have, because of that, deliberately titled our musings, I Am My Father. I am my father. Not just, I didn't say I'm my father's son or my father's offspring, not even my father's representative, but indeed my father. All right? Now, I already told you that about our text. What I'm going to do here is outside of the context of the text, but I'm going to use this text because in both texts, there are two truths that are actually truisms in the sense that these are truths that remain. They're truths, okay? They are self-evident. The one is in Psalm number 132, the 14th verse, and the other, of course, is in the 24th verse of John 12. So again, let me read those two, or even the past that we're going to be looking at today. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. The fearfully and wonderfully made is oftentimes not obvious to us. So even if it is still a truism, somehow we miss it. The John part is more obvious to us, that Jesus said, I tell you very truly, unless a grain of wheat or corn, rice, any of the grains falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it falls into the ground, if it's thrown into the ground, it germinates, it bears fruits, it bears much fruit. All right. So it is this particular truisms, or these truisms, but this particular truism of fall into the ground, a grain, but on germination creates life. That so long as the grain remains a grain without falling, it will still remain a single grain. Now, and then of course, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. So let's explore it. And of course, somebody said, because I'm a Baptist preacher, we're going to do it in 3 parts. Okay, 3 points. Number 1, fathers never die. Okay, write that down. The first thing I need for us to contemplate today on Father's Day is that fathers actually never die. Now, today is Father's Day, so I'm going to be talking about fathers particularly, but some of the things I'm going to say about fathers in many ways also relate to mothers, but I'm going to leave moms out of it today because today is Father's Day, okay? Let's explore this by raising a teleological question. And by teleology, we're thinking about goal, end, purpose. So you probably have not fully contemplated it. What is the purpose of life? What is the end of life? What is the goal of life? Where is this life driving towards? Now, generally in the church, when we ask this question, we answer it often in religious terms. For instance, in the Westminster Shorter Catechism of the Christian faith, the first question is, what is the chief end of man? In other words, what is the goal of man? Why are we here? Answer, the chief goal of man, the chief end of man is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. All right? That is the religious answer to the question of purpose. But there's something I want us to do today. I want us to get somewhat, bracket that, and leave out, if we can, for a moment, the religious part of this question and answer this question ordinarily, say biologically. What is the goal of life? What is the point of life? What is life driving towards? What is its ultimate purpose? What is the most foundational, the most fundamental purpose of life? And in raising this question, we're not just asking the question about man, human even. We're asking questions about all living systems, whether they are plants, they are animals, they are fungi, right? What is the purpose of life? What is the goal of life? What is life driving towards? Now, whether you've thought about it, I'm going to suggest to us that the primary, most fundamental, most elementary, the simplest goal of life is life itself. In other words, the purpose of life is the continuation of life. That is life's purpose. All living things have this singular purpose: the continuation of life or avoidance of the discontinuation of life otherwise, or the species. All life forms are there to continue. All life forms have one singular purpose: to avoid extinction, to avoid going extinct, discontinuing. That's the purpose, that's primary purpose or goal of life. This is why, by the way, there are two other sub-functions or drives that we find in living things. Those are food and sex. They are the two primary drives of living things, particularly living things, including actually plants. They eat food to give energy and sustain life. They reproduce or replicate in order to continue life and avoid extinction. Now, I want you to hold that thought because we are coming to that. Okay? We're coming to tie up this idea that the prime purpose of life, which if you go religious, you can even see it embedded in the original creative story in Genesis 1. All things were made and given the first primary mandate, and the mandate is to reproduce after their kind. All right? So hold that thought. Because I'm coming to say that fathers never really die. Okay? What do you mean? What are you saying? I'm glad you asked. Hold the thought. Because that brings me to my second point. And my second point is that my Father lives. Fathers never die. Secondly, my Father lives. And I want to tell you, to show you, I'm going to tell you the story of my life. which is also, in a way, the story of your life and the story of every single person who ever lived or who will ever live. Can we say that? Who, with what we know today, ever live on the face of the earth. I began the journey of my own life from, as they say in scripture, euphemistically, from the loins of my father. I began that journey in the company of about 300 million siblings. There was me and my siblings, who were about 300 million of us, that left my father's loins. All of us were driving to one specific destination. All 300 million of us, more or less, depending on circumstances with other people. Each one of us were carrying the full package of the code or information, the genetic code that has everything about me. Everything. my everything, my hair, my head, my bones, my marrow, my all of that. They were neatly packaged in what in biology we might call the packages, we might call them chromosomes. All right? Each of us that left the journey carried 23 of them. All right? And we were deposited, and we started the most dangerous journey we will ever encounter. Because we had to pass through what is much, much more than the proverbial valley of the shadow of death. Okay? When we were deposited, our first stop was to pass through what was supposed to be, it was almost like the gate of Armageddon. It was an impregnable biological mesh that was like a gate that led into my mother's cervix. Now, I'm going to talk about my father and my mother in sort of interchangeably way, but follow me for a moment, okay? I'm coming somewhere with this. All right? Our journey was to enter into my mother's cervix. But we had to pass through the gates. This gate was such that, again, we're beginning the fight, the biggest fight we can ever fight in this life. More than 90% of my siblings who started the journey with me perished at this gate. They died. A few million of us made it through this gate and then entered the battle again, in a way, our battle of Armageddon. Because my mother's white cells, immune system, thought that these cells coming in, that's us coming, were enemies, were invaders. And they fought tooth and nail, which is what white blood cells do for us, is to fight enemies, to fight diseases, is to clear them. So they mistook us for disease-carrying agents. And that's why they were fighting. Not knowing that we had a message to deliver, the message of our lives, the message of the continuation of the species. We made it into the suffix, but the battle was not over because the armies continued to fight. We fought through the cervix and into my mother's uterus. By the time I got to my mother's uterus, there were only few of us remaining. The great majority of my siblings that started the journey with me had perished. And then it became now the survival of the fittest. Meanwhile, there's a process that started in my mother that was called ovulation. By the way, I didn't know her then as my mother. She hadn't become my mother yet. Because remember, I was the enemy. I was the invading germ. By the process that biologists call ovulation, one egg had been formed and had left and had already in what is the fallopian tube. It's coming down. And I remember our job when we left my father's loins, we had one goal in mind. We had one destination, all 300 million of us. To take this message to that cell. So now it became the survival of the fittest. Somehow, by all kinds of machinations, I beat out all the other 299.99 million of us. And not yet, because we all converged at this cell, this cell ovum called egg. All right. But somehow I beat them out. Because as soon as I was able to burrow through the egg, there's a reaction. And the reaction caused some really thick layer to build immediately within that second and closed out the entirety of the cell. And only me was able to enter the cell. And note again, all of my over 200 million of my siblings, all of them perished in this journey. Only I survived the journey. And only I made this trip. And in this momentous meeting, I fused into the egg and delivered my 23 chains of chromosome, which had to fuse with the 23 other side of me that was in my mother's egg. Now, note one thing. In that journey, biologists and geneticists have classified them. All those 23 chromosomes, 22 of them were what they call autosomes. They are more or less just other parts of the body. Only one of them is called a sex cell. And it's either marked X or Y. My mom's egg carried 23 chromosomes, and that sex cell in my mother was always X. My father's sperm could carry either an X chromosome or a Y chromosome. It happened that I carried in the sex cell the Y chromosome. So when my Y chromosome that I brought with me fused with my mother's X chromosome, that was the package that decided which sex I was going to be. So a man was created at that point. And the fusing of those two parts of a cell made one cell or zygote. Notice the miracle of fearful and wonderfully made. Having fused now in the ovary, in the fallopian tube, those fighters who were fighting me originally now guided me now fused, and we now becoming one in the zygote, brought us back into the uterine wall and fused in there. And as you say, the rest is history. Why did I tell this story? I'm going to say 3 things. How does it relate to you? 3 things. And listen to me. By the way, I told you that my father lives because he didn't die. Because that information I carried was to a very great extent my father. It was the package of my father. It was the code that made my father. It was all the information that made his grandparents, my grandparents, his parents, his own grandparents, their own grandparents, all the way back to the original pair of human beings, all the way back to call him Adam, call her Eve. I carried them. But that's not just even the wonder. 2 things I need to say that I don't want you to forget today as a father, or first of all, even as a human being. In fact, not just as a father, even if we're talking about father, if you are a human being, I want you to know today, the greatest battle you will ever face in life has already happened. You fought them to be alive in the first place. To be the very sperm that actually germinated the egg was the greatest possible fight you will ever engage in this life. There is nothing that is remotely comparable to it. You have already fought the greatest battle. You have already won it. You have already succeeded beyond the capacity of nearly 300 million other you. Now, here's another thing I want you to lay down today if you're a human person. And this is mind-boggling. Even as I say, I don't have the right language to say what I'm going to say next, but listen to me here. There are billions, maybe trillions, billions of possible human beings who could have been born on this earth, but who will never be born. I told you I left the journey from my father's sack with about 300 million of us, more or less. And that one out of that 300 million succeeded to fertilize the egg. All the other ones perished. They had the potential to be human beings. They will never be. They will never be born. They are forever gone. To be born at all is to be beyond. I don't use the word luck, but it's beyond luck. It's almost beyond miracle. It's beyond being selected, beyond being chosen. You are not just one in a million. You are in multiply hundreds of a million. Your greatest battle has been fought. To be born at all is the greatest success. My father didn't die. My father lives. This is my father. I am my father. Which brings me to the next thing. It makes me think about death. This idea of death. Now, let me contradict myself. I said my fathers never die. Of course, in a literal sense, fathers do die. I mean, my father died about 30 years ago. But what is death really? What is die? What does die mean? Again, I'm almost being just setting out philosophy and religion aside and just biologically speaking, just ordinarily speaking, what is death really? Because notice something. If, as is true, that your father is replicated in your mother, already in you because you're born, then this grain of corn or wheat has already fallen into the ground. In a way, it has actually fulfilled its purpose, and I'm coming to that. The goal of life, which is to continue life, has already been accomplished. What happens to this body? Number one, death is inevitable. It has to happen because it's not his job. You drink water. Excuse me. And when it's empty, what happens? I discard the container. You got a letter. You pull out the letter from the envelope. The envelope has done its job, which is to deliver the letter. You discard it. Because the import is the letter. Right? You plant a seed. The code, the information about the life of the seed, of the tree, everything about the tree is in the seed. All of the information is already written in the seed about the tree. You plant the tree, it germinates, it throws out whatever container that was holding the seed together. So death is actually inevitable in that sense. But then in that sense, death is really nothing. Death is meaningless. It's almost an illusion because in a way, there's no death really. There's death actually when there is extinction. But once you have been able to pass your gene on, you can't die. You're not dead. You're only transformed into a new life. Which is why I am my father. The envelope that carried it had been discarded and buried. But my father lives in me. And I'm going to carry this and pass it on and replicate it. And life goes on. So again, which goes now full circle. So What's the point of all this? What is the goal of life? What do we do with life? I have 3 things I think I'm going to suggest for us on this Father's Day. The first thing is to actually accomplish the goal of life, which is to replicate self. Because the most fundamental, the most simple, the most foundational goal of life is to replicate life. Life replication is the most fundamental, the most foundational goal of life. And therefore, it is to replicate self. Second, having replicated, having reproduced self, what happens here? What happens here, for me, are actually 3 things. They are gratitude. They are fulfillment. They are to realize that the most fundamental duty that I owe has already been accomplished, and which is that I have continued life. The second thing that comes out of gratitude is to live a joyful life. To rejoice, really, to be joyful about life, to be joyful about fatherhood. And knowing that death is really, in many ways, death is really an illusion. If you've replicated self, your death is an illusion. It's inevitable, but it's actually nothing. The remaining part of life after replication is restful. Is to live a grateful, joyful, restful life. There's a thought which should have been my second, but I did it for purpose, is to make the environment conducive for life to flourish. Maybe you switch it, if you like. Replicate self, live a grateful life, and make life conducive for the continuation of life. Right? Those are the 3 really goals of life. And those are the 3 major goals of fatherhood. Those are really the 3 major functions of fatherhood. To bring it together, I want to ask another kind of question. The Lord Jesus Christ, making a statement once, said there are people who are eunuchs. Eunuchs are some people are eunuchs. They are incapable of producing for all kinds of reasons. People are incapable of replicating self. For all kinds of reasons. Some are made so by other people. But let's just say that for whatever reason, there are people who are incapable of replicating the self. Have they therefore failed the primary goal of life? Glad you asked. What if? Let's say it this way. Let me be clear to say that there's a man by the name of Scott Fitzgerald who said that the first test of first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. To hold two opposing ideas in the mind at the same time but still be able to function. So let me hold two opposing ideas in mind. One is, yes, let's not paper over it. In a certain kind of way, it is not to be, at a personal subjective level, it is not to be desired to not be able to replicate. All right? Let's be honest to ourselves. Barrenness is considered, even in scriptures, it's not considered a pleasurable thing. In real life, people don't consider inability to replicate, to produce something to be joyful about, to be grateful about. So let's be honest with that. Okay? That's one idea. On the other hand, I want you to listen to something. For those who are unable to replicate, let me say it this way. Nature is brutally selfish and single-minded. Nature doesn't really care too much about us as individuals. All right? I know how brutal this might say, but it's true. Nature is brutal about its single-mindedness. To ameliorate that, nature sees the big picture, right? For instance, nature is interested in its single-minded purpose of self-replication. That is why, for instance, it took the army of 3 million of us to go for this reason of just making the possibility of one successful one. That's 200 million plus of us perished. For nature, that is not as important as the whole. And by the way, and I know it's not coming out well here, but please help me here. Understand that in our cultural, religious, subjective thinking, especially if you are either in the West or influenced by Western ideas, Europe, America, and all the rest of them, we have made the self, the individual self, the center of things. All right? And that cultural, civilizational understanding is actually contrary to nature. It's actually contrary to scripture. Nature doesn't think in terms of the individual. Nature doesn't think about the person. The scriptures also, we are a community, we are people. In fact, let me say this. I've heard it said, and probably have said it myself, and like I always say, habits die hard, so I might even say it tomorrow. Okay? People say things like this, that if you are the only person on the face of the earth, Jesus would have come to die for you. Now, that's a cute, subjective, religious sentiment to have. But actually, that is not, first of all, it's not scriptural. Okay? I just don't know. Okay, let's just stay there. But it's not scripture. There's no scripture that says that or even teaches that if you are the only person. In fact, scripture doesn't talk normally in terms of you. I know that this idea, for instance, you must be born again, and we reduce it to a singular you, and everything is about you and you, me, I'm going to heaven, and all the rest of them. Understand that it is cultural. Okay? Again, maybe nothing wrong with that, except when it makes us forget that the real thing is about that we are, not I am. So first, that we need to think as nature will think more broadly, that the march of nature is the continuation of species, and for all kinds of reasons, it is not true that all members of this community of living, whether human or animals or flowers or fungi that all of them will make it and replicate. No, first of all, nature doesn't work that way, because if they happen, then you will overpopulate and then suffocate. So nature is also selective in that sense. But that does not mean that if you cannot self-replicate, there's not something, because nature thinks in the sense of we all together can also perform the other functions. So assuming that you cannot individually procreate, still rejoice and be glad that life continues. First of all, remember what it took for you to even be human in the first, to be born in the first place. And secondly, rejoice that mankind is still continuing, that the life of mankind is continuing. Sometimes I feel like, I'm not sure where this fits, but thinking about nature, I think, again, from my limited understanding of virus and how, virus is this animal that cannot, if it's animal, if you still don't know what exactly it is, but it's not even a single cellular being, because this cell does not divide. So the only way that virus will work is if it gets into a human cell or a cell, either human or animal or plants. It's some virus will need that, but it will need a cell, and it's when it enters a cell that it actually can mimic that cell and cause that cell to reproduce itself. So you get a COVID cell, a COVID virus, for instance. It enters the human cell and begins to use the human cells to multiply itself. And then, because it's trying to continue, if it grows enough, then that human person will be able to transfer it to another person, and then it continues to grow in that person, and that person will touch another person. We call it infection. But the poor thing is trying to live, because that's the only way it can prolong its own existence and not be extinct. All right? And because it's slower in killing the host, it can continue to transmit and transfer to and continue to extend its own life. By the way, Ebola, on the other hand, is unsuccessful, because Ebola is an efficient killer, right? Ebola, somebody is infected by Ebola, it gets into the human cell, it multiplies so quickly that it overwhelms the person and they die before they can pass it on to another living thing. So Ebola kills off everything that can be its host within the environment, and then it has nothing else it has no way to grow, and it goes extinct, right? At least for that particular environment. So nature we're continuing. And so every child born anywhere is our child. It's our community, it's our species continuing to exist and not be extinct. And so you can still live a life of gratitude for the fact that our species continues, so that mankind can continue on earth. And then the two other parts, it is, now I talked about make the world a conducive environment for life to continue, because, okay, go back. It's not enough to just replicate. There was something my uncle used to say. Was saying to somebody, said that he would say to his own children, he said, if I left you on the, those days you have certain kinds of leaves that you get, and then the woman gives a bath on the leaves, right? And in fact, they call them in Igbo, he said, akwụkwọ ijikara. He said, if I had left you on that akwụkwọ ijikara, meaning the mat, the thing, the mat, the leaf mat that was made, if I had left you on that mat after you were born, you would never have succeeded. You would never have grown up. In other words, you would have died. Because for some reason, we humans are born incapable of self-help. Right? Some animals can give birth and they just jump up and keep going. Human beings have to be cared for. Therefore, just replication is not enough, which brings you to something else. And that is fatherhood. Right? For those who are unable to, and for all of us, fathers, real or putative fatherhood, because a fatherhood is functioning in the capacity of father, even if one is not a literal father. A literal father still entered into the role of a father and performs some fatherhood roles. I have outlined what I call fatherhood role in terms of, again, what I call the masculine energy. What does masculinity brings to the table, as they say, table of life? And I think I have had some 6 different things that fatherhood or masculine energy brings. It brings a number. Number 1 is procreation, which is this idea of replication of self. It brings, I have it in peace, it brings purpose. It gives direction. That is, the masculine energy is to give direction. It's to say, here's where we're going. Here is the way. All right? That's the role of a father. That's masculinity. Okay? It protects. Okay? It provides. Right? It's present. And then it brings parental discipline. All right? Okay, those are the functions or the energy that masculinity brings to the table of life. All right. So even when we are not, whether we are real fathers or putative fathers, this is how we make the life more conducive for life to flourish. Because again, what are those 3 functions? Replicate self, make the environment conducive for life to flourish, rejoice, be glad, and rest, fulfilled, satisfied that you have fulfilled the most critical purpose of life, which is the continuation of species. Fathers never die. They replicate. My father lives on because he's replicated in me. And by the way, by the grace of God, I have also been privileged to replicate self. So, I will not die. I'll live forever. I'll live as far as my gene continues to be replicated in children and children's children and children's children's children and children's children's children, that there be people in the world. And I am my father. I replicate, I rejoice, I make the world a conducive place for life to continue, for life to flourish. Before I finish this, I want to talk to my Nigerian fathers here. Okay, I want to go to Nigeria. I want to talk to a Nigerian person. So Nigerian fathers gather. Nigerian fathers, whether you are a real father or a putative father, let's talk about this idea of making our environment more conducive for life to flourish, which is the role or the function of fatherhood, the masculine energy that we bring towards the cultivation of humans. Because again, it is not just enough to replicate, but also for life to continue. How do we work towards, in the United States, they call it a more perfect union, because the idea is that the United States, somebody said this, yet to be United States of America. You haven't gotten a perfect union. Everything is driving towards that union because we're not there yet. How do you bring a more perfect environment, a more perfect society? A society that is conducive for life to flourish, which is the goal of life, which is the function of fatherhood. And today, I want to be more. I want to be more practical, more relevant to right now. Today, this is June. I want to talk about political engagement. All right. I want to talk about political education and engagement. Right. How do you have an environment that is conducive for life to flourish? What is the role and responsibility of fathers in this process? And I want to talk about the political engagement as a principal way of bringing a flourishing society. And to also talk to fathers in the church, Christian fathers or fathers who are Christians. And then again, this is not Christian, it's just fathers, whether you're atheist or theist or Muslim or whatever you are. But yeah, I'm usually, my constituency is Christian, okay? And I want to say some really serious things. I want to get away from childishness and get to adultness, fatherhood. Again, knowing that the role of the father is to not just procreate, but to give purpose, direction, protect, provide for, be present, bring parental discipline, guidance, and all of that. Educate. At this present time in Nigeria, the role of fathers is to teach and encourage and insist on political education and political engagement. Why? Nigerians are going to have the opportunity in less than a year now. Okay, say 2007, but actually it's January or February the elections in Nigeria. So it's actually about 6 months away, right? In 6 months, Nigerians will have an opportunity to set the stage for whether or not and by how the country, the environment might be more conducive for life to flourish. I'm going to tell us what to do and what not to do, especially Christian adults, Christian fathers. The Independent National, Electoral Commission has set out between May the 10th, I guess, it's already passed, to May the 11th to July the 10th. July the 10th is a few weeks from now, all right? As a period of continuous voter registration. So, if you don't have a voter registration, a voter card, register, right? if you have registered or you are in doubt about your registration, go and check the status of your registration. Every father should not only do that, but encourage everybody else of it to do that. That's your job, right? The INEC Voters Online Portal, you can do it online. Go to your computer, phones, everything. All right? Is crv.inecnigeria.org/VVS. I think is voter or something like that. All right? Okay? All the information about your voter card and your voter registration status is there. If you've registered before, check it. I've just checked mine, and everything is Instacart. It's very active. So I'm properly registered, and I have my voter card. I should have brought it with me. Where's my voter card? I think I have my voter card around me. Okay, let me see if it's there. So do I have a Nigeria? Okay. Yeah, it's there somewhere. Any rate, I checked I verified my voter registration. Okay, so I'm not telling you what to do, something I don't do myself. Okay, so I just did. Now, this is what to do. Okay, this is what every father needs to, again, like I say, teach, encourage, and insist on having it done. Make sure everybody around you do that and have everybody do that. If they've not registered to vote, they must register. If there's anybody under your employment, they must do that. If there's somebody under your care, they must do what they must. They should. Now, let me say what not to do. At this very point, let me say it this way, and I want to say it as sincerely as I can, and as I don't know how else to say, but this is this now. One of the most irresponsible things to do now is to call prayer meetings for Nigeria. It is to pray for Nigeria, for good government to come, or for Nigeria, God to work on the economy or to work on this. It's an irresponsible cop-out. All right? So the first thing to avoid is let's forget this irresponsibility of calling for prayers. All right? God intervenes in the affairs of modern economies through the political system. And it is sinful, oh yes, for an adult, a responsible adult, to, for instance, not register, not vote, and then turn around and ask God to give us good government. It's insult. It's okay? Right. So, this is not a time for all these prayer meetings. You know, all of our meetings, all of our groups, men's meetings, women's meetings, youth groups, and choir, all of these things. This moment is the moment to encourage, to teach, and insist that people, members of that group, understand, go to register, and understand what they need to be doing, and have something that the PVC will become the means to admit people into things. No PVC, for instance, no assistance. Somebody wants to give them assistance, let them go and show you their PVC. If they show you their PVC, then give them assistance. Now, that's on the PVC side. Whichever one they should do, there's a window now of weeks. No weeks. Yeah, probably weeks until the 10th. All right. So there's a window. Check the status of your PVCs. Check the status of your own registration. Go do it. It's the godly thing to do, and be sure you are not making this call for prayers. I've heard some churches try to call people, Christians call people together. Either they do it out of ignorance, or it's actually a sinister political move. But it's really sinister. It's actually devilish. Now, oh yes. Now, secondly, for this period, this 6-month period is a period to teach. You have to do it yourself to teach and encourage people how to critically analyze political situations. People have to know how to critically analyze, I call them persons, policy, platforms, and policies. All right? Persons are the individuals clamoring for attention who want to hold offices, whether at the national level or at the subnational levels. Who are they? What are their antecedents, either past or present? Now, there are no quote and unquote angels out there, okay? There are no political angels. It is not an absolutist, extremely good or extremely bad. There are no such things. We are here, right? The extremely good or extremely bad is not easy to find. But in the whole mix of it, somebody is still better than somebody. Okay, so the idea that, all politicians are bad or all of them are the same is nonsense. It's not true, first of all. It's not factually true. All of them are not the same. We're not all the same. All right? You can still say, for instance, that this person, irrespective of the fact that we are all not perfect, yet that this person is a good person or that this person is a bad person, yet there are still such things. So, but then we cannot take the envelope position that, they're all bad because they're not, or they're all good because they're not. But persons do come with, we can judge persons. We are called to judge persons. We are to judge their platform. We're going to look at what are the platforms. Well, in Nigeria, it doesn't really matter a lot because all political parties simply copy from one another and says lofty things that in the platforms, they are not really different. So that doesn't help us quite a lot. The policies are also like that. It so happens that Nigeria has not been able to develop because we failed to do our work. So, we the citizens, Nigeria has not developed to the point that policies and platforms and ideologies are really that important. So it goes down to this idea of persons. All right? Again, who are they? What are their personal characters in relation to greed, avarice, stuff like that? Who are they? Okay? And so on, okay? But we need to think like that. We need to teach our people to pay attention to such things and stop casting votes because somebody belongs to my family or my tribe or ethnic group or my religion and all the rest of them. Those do have effects. But again, remember that the economy does not respect your ethnicity or your religion or those kinds of things. And then, not only that we're going to do and teach, judging politicals and do it, but with that also teach and do it yourself and insist that people do actually go and vote. That they take the effort to go and stand in line, vote, and stand there to make sure that their votes count, right? Let me say this again. It's ordinary. I do participate in the voting process, except when it is impossible to do that. But I try to participate in the voting process. I do these things and do vote. Okay. Let me make these 2 points about this, and then we will go. One, we must shun this idea that we're in the minority. They are after us. No, we're not. And that is also true whether we are citizens or particularly Christians. Now, I want to be talking to our Christian community now. There are all kinds of reasons, sociological, historical, why Christians and Christianity thinks itself as the marginalized, the persecuted, the outsiders. But it's not really true in many modern societies. For instance, in America here, we think that Christians are persecuted. That's impossible. There's no Christian persecution in America. I mean, there could be persons who suffer in any different case, but to talk about Christian persecution, no, America is fundamentally a Christian environment. In fact, if there's any persecution, we are in the power. We hold the power. So this whole idea of Christians are persecuted in America, it's a wash, right? Now, in Nigeria, it's a bit more nuanced. But let's simply understand that we do have the power. We are, especially in certain situations. Let me give you my hypothesis about corruption. I've made this point in different times, so but I'm going to make this point again now because I think it's relevant. I'm going to close with it. At random, here is my hypothesis, and I wish this would be tried. I want this actually experimented. In fact, if you can get this to your, and I'm calling on talk about fatherhood. I've not only thought about 5, but let me think about 7. My hypotheses are that, say, Lagos, Nigeria, where I stay most of the time. My hypothesis is this. The corruption in Lagos exists because, for the most part, because of Christian commission and omission. Commission in the sense that Christians actually do the corruption. Okay? Sorry. Give me one moment. I don't know what my stuff is. Sorry, my tool fell off. But hear me out. It exists because, number one, Christians in Lagos actually do the corruption. So corruption exists in Lagos because of Christian activity. Now, I'm not ruling out others, okay? Follow me. Secondly, because of what Christians omit to do. And here is what I think I need for us to experiment. At random, I have picked out 7 different churches in Lagos, different ministries. Number 1, the Deeper Life of Pastor W.F. Kumuyi. Number 2, Living Faith of Bishop David Oyedepo. 3, Redeemed Church of Pastor E.A. Adeboye. 4, because I am Baptist Convention of Lagos, Reverend Dr. Victor Akerele. Lord Chosen, Pastor Lazarus Moka. Trem, Bishop Michael Konkwo. Mountain of Fire, Dr. D.K. Olukoya. Now, here, follow me. Imagine for a moment that these 7 persons came together and said something like this. For the entire month of July, anybody who is a member of these 7 religious organizations, we will not give bribe, we will not take bribe at all. And every member of these groups, or even half the members of these 7 groups, were to make this vow and get into Lagos in July. Do the math for me. How much of corruption, bribery in Lagos will go down? Whether it's at the police, last month, EFCC, courts, whatever corruption happens in Lagos. So corruption in Lagos is happening, number 1, because it is the Christian members of these churches who do it. But secondly, members of this church have never taken it to ask that we actually proactively do something for our society. And we don't do that. What do? We sit back and then ask God to do that by calling for prayer meetings And again, these useless prayer meetings, because that's what they really are. They give us some self-satisfaction that we have done something, but we really have done nothing. So I'm asking us to be fathers. I'm asking fathers to produce a society that is conducive for life. We have 6 months, more or less, before God has given us the opportunity to cause for our country to provide an environment where life flourishes. And what we do with it will determine what's going to happen for the next 4 years of Nigeria. And let me tell you something. If we fail to do what we're going to do, the next 4 years is going to be as bad, if not worse than this. And there is no God anywhere that can come to help us. I hear people say all the other, God will help us in Nigeria. God is not going to help us. Why? Because God has already helped us. This is God helping us. This is how God helps us. Let us be fathers. Let us be adults. Let us be joyful. Let us live with gratitude. Let us, of course, after we've replicated self, let us make the environment, make the world a conducive place. And not worry, because the greatest battles of your life has already been fought, and you're a winner. And how incredibly miraculous, how incredibly blessed you are to ever be born and be awed by the fact that for you to exist at all, there are multiplied millions that could have been born but will never be born humans. My Father lives because my Father lives in me. Because I live. Have a wonderful Father's Day. And continue to be who God has made you to be. Blessings. Amen.
Open up the pages, let the truth unfold. In the believer's manual, the greatest story ever told. From Genesis to Revelation, every word divine. A call for every Christian to let God's wisdom shine. The believer's manual for biblical understanding. Let's read the word simply and apply it with true meaning. Avoiding errors, embracing truth in the believer's manual. We find our living proof. No twisting of the scriptures, no bending of the truth, just pure and simple wisdom for every age and youth. For the word is living, sharper than a sword. In the believer's manual, we find our living proof. No believer's manual for biblical understanding. Let's read the word simply and apply it with true meaning. Avoiding errors, embracing truth in the believer's manual. We find our living proof. No twisting of the scriptures, no bending of the truth, just pure and simple wisdom for every every age and youth. For the word is living, sharper than a sword. In the believer's manual, we find our sure reward. Believer's manual for biblical understanding. Let's read the word simply and apply it with true meaning. Avoiding errors, embracing truth. In the believer's manual, we find our living proof. So open up your heart and open up this book. In the believer's manual, let God's voice be heard. For in the pages of truth, we find our sure foundation. A call for every Christian to read with dedication. Believer's manual for biblical understanding. Let's read the word simply and apply it with true meaning. Avoiding errors, embracing truth. In the believer's manual, we find our living proof. Believer's manual.